Hey y'all, welcome back to my channel. It's me, Kia Simone. And listen, I watched part 1 of Carlos King's interview with Kenya Moore. Now y'all know I ain't the biggest fan of Kenya, but Kenya actually made me cry. So yeah, I want to talk about it. Now before we get started, I would like to announce that we have officially hit 14,000 subscribers. Thank y'all. Thank you so much to every single one of y'all who is subscribed to the channel. I appreciate y'all, old and new. And if you're not subscribed, please hit the button. So they start the interview, catching up over old times and the good old days on Real Housewives of Atlanta. She said, I don't know why you don't start a show. I said, now, Kenya is shady without even trying. Because, ma'am, what the hell do you think Love and Marriage, Huntsville, DC, Detroit, all them shit is? Carlos caught that damn shade because he ain't say nothing about them damn shows he already got. He said, well, Kenya, what kind of show? What kind of show you think I should have? Kenya suggested some show with a bunch of reality TV icons that he is giving advice and getting together. Bravo's days must be numbered because why is Kenya over here trying to set up her next damn job? So Carlos starts his line of questioning by going back to Kenya's childhood, and he asked her, when did she remember realizing that she was meant to be something special? Kenya said she doesn't think that she ever realized she was supposed to be something special. She just realized that she was different. The life that she was living was different. The adversity that she experienced from her mother was different. And I think that was the first thing that kind of stood out to me, is that she never realized herself to be special as much as she realized that her life was different. And different doesn't always have a positive connotation, especially to children when they don't understand why their life is different. Kenya said what she does remember is when she was about 11 or 12, she was hiding in her mother's closet with a pre-recorded message that she made to give to her mother, who would not speak to her, where she was asking her to just acknowledge her. She said, you don't have to call me your daughter, but could you please just speak to me? Can we at least be friends? Apparently they all lived with Kenya's grandmother at the time. She said she was hiding in the closet when her mother came home. She figured out that she was hiding in her closet, found her with this recorder, and she was absolutely livid. She told Kenya, you're not my child. She went and found Kenya's grandmother, who is her mother, and told her, I never had a child. Kenya said that was the first time she ever saw her grandmother stand up for her, and she asked her mother, why can't you just speak to her? Why do you have to treat her this way? Once her mother was done arguing with her grandmother, she turned to Kenya and said, I will never be your friend. I will dog you for the rest of your life. I had to stop and take a second to really think about how it must have affected her, how alone and abandoned and rejected she must have felt for her mother to declare herself her sworn enemy as a child. Kenya said it was at that point that she realized that that was the end of any opportunity to have a real relationship with her mother. She said she doesn't really know what happened to her, but what she does realize is she developed this thick skin, and her mission became to never allow her mother to destroy her. So Kenya goes on to tell the story about winning the second pageant that she ever entered. She was 16 years old. At the time, she was dating a predator who was 11 years her senior. He was 27, she was 16. She said it was somebody who used to hang out around her high school and followed her home from school like a straight up predator. And rather than her mother do anything to protect her from said predator, her mother contacts the pageant and tells the people who are over the pageant that Kenya is seeing some older guy and she's an alcoholic and this should not be your beauty queen. Ma'am, when I tell you this lady need her ass whooped. So you mean to tell me you don't feel enough connection to this child to acknowledge her as your child, to be participant as her mother, parent, guardian, role model, any damn thing, but you feel connected enough to act out your disdain, which is truly your disdain for self, on this child. Everybody don't need kids, I'm sorry. And because of her mother's accusations, Kenya had to actually go on trial for this beauty pageant, where both of her grandmothers had to come speak on her behalf, and she had to defend her crown. So Carlos starts to ask questions surrounding Kenya's conception and how she came into the world. And Kenya was explaining that she was born to a teen mom in the 70s in a family where they had already had a teenage mother. And so it wasn't necessarily a badge of honor to have another child by a teenage mom in the family. So Carlos asked, well, do you think maybe the stigma that was attached to her being a pregnant teenager is what caused her to become reclusive? And Kenya said, well, I don't know, because I only know the lady after she had me. And as I've always known her, she's always been a recluse. Kenya said she thinks it's deeper than that, and she hopes that in her lifetime she gets to hear her mother's story be told, because nobody really knows what her full story is or why she is the way that she is. And Carlos asked, well, do you think she's battling something in terms of mental health? Kenya said, absolutely. That's what made her study psychology. Kenya said she studied psychology because she wanted to know what was wrong with her mother. That was her only passion in life. She wanted to know what could make a person look their child in the face with all sincerity in their eyes and confidence in their chest and say, you are not my child. I never had you. What has to be wrong with that person? Number one, that is very telling of how a parent's rejection can actually shape a person's life path, because she was actually basing her studies around figuring out why her mother rejected her. Secondly, now I do definitely think there's a mental health issue. I also think there's a spiritual health issue. I think it's some demons at play, because it would be one thing to not feel some association to this child. It would be one thing to not be able to wrap your mind around this is your biological child. It's a different thing when you take up a mission to destroy this child. You won't just abandon them and leave them be, leave them to figure life out. You are on a mission to destroy them. Kenya said that one story that she told about her trying to get her crown taken was just one of many. So Carlos brought up when Kenya went to her mother's door on season 7 or 8 of Real Housewives of Atlanta. And for any of us who watched that, we remember that she went knocking on her mom's door, looking for her mom to speak to her, acknowledge her, and she wouldn't open the door. She wouldn't acknowledge her at all. So Carlos asked, well, we know she won't speak to you, but did anybody else in the family catch hell from you going to her door with these cameras? She said, oh, hell yeah. Aunt Lori caught all the smoke. Kenya said, and her Aunt Lori agreed with her mother. She said, that's her life, that's her house. Leave her alone, let her be. She has a right to not want to be bothered with you. And Kenya said that's the point at which all of the viewers turned on her damn aunt. Everybody loved Aunt Lori. I remember I loved Aunt Lori. And when she said that shit to Kenya, I lost all respect, because how dare you sit in this girl's face and tell her, your mama got a right to reject you. Leave her alone. Why are you bothering her? Kenya said the viewers loved her Aunt Lori. But after that scene, she said, I want to say they hated her, but Carlos said people were very disappointed. We were very disappointed. I did not expect that from her aunt. And I remember even then crying for Kenya and realizing that she was kind of alone. Like, she's really alone in this world, because even the people who claim to be her family and claim to love her and claim to have relationship with her won't truly protect her. And that's the point at which Kenya started to tear up in the interview. Kenya said it was a very difficult time in my life and for my family, and I honestly felt like nobody ever stood up for me. Nobody ever stood up for the child. And as Kenya starts to cry, she asked Carlos, who the hell you supposed to be, Oprah? Got me around here crying all over the damn internet. Carlos said, well, why are we talking about it? Let me go on the record and say that this Kenya, this vulnerable Kenya, is the Kenya that I know. He said, that's actually why I get so disappointed in seeing what happens with you on the show, how you come across to the public, because this is not the Kenya that I know. I know Kenya who is vulnerable in conversation. I know Kenya who is multifaceted, who's not a one-trick pony. He said when his mother passed away, Kenya surprised him and showed up at his mother's funeral. He said that's not something she had to do, but that's the kind of person that she is. And truthfully speaking, the thing I have always noticed is that Kenya is an absolute S on this show. But when I hear about people who say they meet her in off-camera settings, nobody ever has anything bad to say about her. People always say, oh, she was so nice, and oh, she's so different from how she is on the show. And so it does lead you to wonder, is this who you are? Is this part of who you are? And this is the only part that we see? Or is this a character that you're playing? Because I always hear people say that Kenya is so different off camera than what we see on this show. Carlos said he feels like his mission in life is to create safe spaces for people who are misunderstood, like Kenya. Carlos said people watch 42 minutes of a show once a week for 6 months out of the year, and they feel like they know you. And I feel like you in particular are one of the most misunderstood characters in reality TV, period. And Carlos is right, and I can admit that even for myself. That I watch this show once a week, and all 42, 43 minutes ain't even dedicated to each character. You have an ensemble cast who is split up between 42 minutes. So you might have 7 minutes per person, but you do make your assessments and your judgments, and you feel like you know this person's character from what is displayed. And that's not necessarily always a fair assessment or a fair judgment. But on the flip side of that, you do have to take accountability for the image that you project, for how you choose to show up for the public. And while I do get that Kenya has a lot that she's dealing with and a lot that has shaped her, Kenya also has to take accountability for how she shows up. But back to what he was saying. He said, you know, people think you are mean, a bitch, vicious, a villain, evil, but none of those words are what come to mind when I think of you. None of those words are what come to mind when I talk to God about you. And that's a deep statement from a friend. Aside from the show and the character and whoever she is to the public, for your friend to say that that is not what comes to mind when I talk to God about you, that's deep. That's love. Carlos asked Kenya, do you feel like what you experienced with your mother shaped you as a woman? She said, absolutely. But more than that, it was my grandmother. I had my grandmother who did love me, who treated me like a mother would treat a child. And she instilled all of the things in me that a mother would instill, be it love, self-esteem, confidence. Kenya pointed out that her grandmother would always tell her how smart she was. Now, Kenya is an undeniably beautiful woman, but her grandmother always emphasized how proud she was of her for her intelligence. And it stood out so much to me because the way that Kenya describes her grandmother reminds me so much of my grandmother. And I love that for her, especially being that she had the kind of mother that she had. Because now I got a mama. And my grandmama still was everything to me. So to know that she endured what she endured with her mother, but she had her grandmother to pour all these things into her. Now, it doesn't negate the wound that her mother created, but Kenya said everything that she is at her core, everything that is good about her came from her grandmother. Carlos said Kenya is very smart, which is what sets her apart from the other ladies on the show. And that's what pisses the other ladies off, is that she's not just this beautiful woman who's going to come and look cute. She's going to actually drag you intellectually. She said, listen, at the core of me, I'm a happy person. I want everybody to get along. I love everybody. I want everybody to have a good time. But if you quit me, I'm going to tear your ass up. That is some Aquarius shit. That is an Aquarius in a nutshell. Kenya said the problem is when I offer rebuttals, it's with all the force I got. So when I'm knocking your head off, people forget that this person came swinging at me first. Now, I could say that's also some Aquarius shit, but Kenya, everybody wasn't always starting with you now. You came on here with the shits. So Carlos asked Kenya, do you think that you being judged more harshly for your comebacks is rooted in colorism? Carlos referenced Candace from Real Housewives of Potomac and said, you know, when it's an undeniably black woman who is clearly intelligent, accomplished, and able to express herself, and she's able to drag the girls for filth, the people seem to not be able to take them. Kenya said she does feel like that has been happening throughout the franchises. She does feel like there are choices being made, and she does feel like, no, they cannot take us. Now, Kenya and her character or foolishness and antics aside, Kenya is right. There's a theme of colorism that happens throughout not only these franchises, but it permeates a lot of Bravo's programming. So then Carlos shifted gears and talked about Kenya's transition from being a beauty queen to working in media and film. He said she went from being Miss USA to acting and everything from Waiting to Exhale, Martin, the Jamie Foxx show, to producing movies like Twa. Kenya said she went into that field because it's natural to her. She said she is kind of split between her love of psychology and her love of performing arts. Kenya said she was frustrated with where she was in her life and she wanted to do something different. She figured I can make my own content, and her first production credit was Twa, which she did with Will Packer. She said, y'all see what his career is. Now, we gonna give Kenya her credit. Twa was a movie to see when it was a movie to see. She said, and while we talking about it, it's Is this microphone on? Can somebody please ask Will Packer why he ain't worked with me since twa? Kenya don't frown and open up a can of worms. Carlos started by shouting out Will Packer and his wife. He said, because you know I know Kenya and her antics. So shout out to Will and Heather Packer. I appreciate y'all for being on Behind Every Man. And now that I've said that and I've made it clear that I am acknowledging that this man is very married and I ain't got nothing to do with what's going on. Yeah, could y'all please tell Kenya why y'all won't work with her? Kenya said, yeah, well, while you giving disclaimers, give this one. I might be actually responsible for putting Will Packer on the map. Yeah, I just said that out loud. See, and that's exactly why them damn people ain't hired you. Carlos said, now you might not have a chance with Will, but this is my chance. He said, now I've always wanted to do a reboot of Twa. So Kenya, if you down, I'm down. Are you down? She said, yeah, but the problem is I don't own the rights to that shit. So now Kenya. She said, now we can do a version of it. We can do a bootleg if that's what you want to do. Carlos said, no, let's go on to the next idea because I ain't got time to be getting sued by no more people. You know Candy already on Max. He said, well, I had an idea that I never told you about. She said, oh, tell me. He said, so I was thinking that me and you could maybe produce a Black Melrose Place. He said, I think you would be perfect for it. I think you would be the perfect villain. I got the money if you got the time. Can you say, all right, well now, if you got the damn money, yes, I'll go home and write this shit tonight. Carlos explains to Kenya that she to him is what Heather Locklear was to TV back then. He feels like Heather Locklear would be brought onto a show like Melrose Place or whatever show she was on, and she would resurrect a dying show. And he feels like Kenya has that same power in terms of reality TV. Even in terms of Real Housewives of Atlanta, he said in season 4, he really just felt like something was missing or something was off, but he was still a young producer and he didn't know quite what that was. He left the show after season 4. Kenya came on season 5, and he said even though he was not on staff, he was on the phone weekly with production, and they were telling him, you got to get down here and see the spectacle of a damn woman. She twirling all over the place, starting all kind of shit. This is what we needed, and you missing it. Now, Kenya worked my last damn nerves when she first came on, but something my sister has taught me over time is that these kind of people make good TV. And they do, because, I mean, you tune in every week to curse their asses out. So she did make good TV. She changed the tone and the trajectory of the show. It wasn't so much everybody is just Nene's friend and up under Nene. It actually was somebody to come in and challenge Nene. Now, for somebody who was watching the show from day one or who might have really liked Nene, that presents an issue, but she creates the tension that's needed to push the show forward. So then Carlos brings up what actually brought Kenya to reality TV, and he says it's a story that she's told to him privately that influenced his decision to leave Real Housewives of Atlanta, but she's never told publicly. And he says the story that she told was that she felt like her life was Groundhog Day. She was doing the same thing over and over. Every pilot season, she's in LA trying to shop shows, and she decided that she just needed something different. So she got in her car and she drove to Atlanta and decided to embark on a reality TV career. And he asked her to talk to the world about where she was in her life at that time. She said she was in a place where she felt stagnant. She was in her 30s. She had been in and out of long-term relationships. She had a number of proposals, so she could have been married. It just ain't never really worked out like that. She said she just became this person who stayed at home all the time, and all she did was work. And she worked enough to pay her bills and keep the lights on. She had her own home that she bought in her 20s, and she owned a home in California. And it was a good life. It was a decent life. It was a life to be thankful for, but she knew she wanted more out of life. There was just something more. Kenya said there is a scripture that says, leap and there will be a net. And that's how she felt at the time, that she felt like she had family and friends in Atlanta, and she was just going to take the leap and see what happens. And here we are. And again, I'm going to try not to cry because that spoke to me so much. I really identified with Kenya in that moment, because I know what it is to not be on Kenya's level, but to build a life for yourself. And then you get to this point where you do feel stagnant and you feel like you want something different. And to hear her tell this story from where she's at right now, this is the result of her leap. There really was a net and she made it. And regardless of whatever perception there is of her, I do feel like in this moment, she is demonstrating what it is to take the leap. She is demonstrating the other side of taking the leap, that she literally took a leap in faith, and this is where it led her. And maybe she knows, maybe she doesn't, but that is extremely impactful coming from somebody like her. Vulnerable moment. Sometimes, even for the strongest of us, we need to see somebody else do it. We need to see that somebody else took that leap and the net really was there. And so I think for me, this was one of the most impactful moments of this interview, for her to share that and to see her sitting on her perch where she is as a result of taking the leap. She said as soon as she took that leap of faith, as soon as the word got out that she was moving to Atlanta, things just started to fall into place for her. She was really good friends with Miss Lawrence, who was good friends with one of the producers of the show. He spoke highly of her, recommended her, and the rest is history. Kenya says she heard about the show from Miss Lawrence before it ever aired, and she remembers telling him, that damn show ain't gonna work. I don't know what the hell they got going on over there, but that ain't gonna work. And here she is all these years later working on this month that she didn't think was gonna work. She said, now fast forward to when the show actually is on air. It is actually working. She said she didn't really care for some of the characters being Nene. She said Nene was just loud and brash, and she just didn't like her for whatever reason. She said now once she got on the show and she got to know Nene, it was different. Kenya was saying, you know, you have to get to know people aside from what they show you on TV. And Carlos said, well, that's why I appreciate the beginning of this conversation, because people get to see the vulnerable side of you and not just what's shown on TV. Kenya said, or what they want to show you. Child, Carlos got quiet, started looking at his nails and shit. Girl, I got me one foot back in the door. You ain't about to fuck that up for me. So since they talking about editing and production and all the behind the scenes magic, Carlos wanted to talk about how they cast the show then versus now. Kenya said, yeah, this used to be some elite shit. Now it's some EBT shit. Everybody can get it. Carlos said the casting for The Real Housewives of Atlanta used to be much like an exclusive club that you couldn't just get into, even if you had the money. But now it's like a playground anybody can show up to and just come sit down and plug in and act a damn fool. They said back at the time that Kenya got on the show, you had to actually try out. They had to do a trial filming period for you. She said she filmed for over a month with no pay and with no job security. Kenya said now they thought they was gonna play with her. They thought they was gonna film her for free forever. And she said, that's a damn lie. If I done gave y'all over a month of all this twirl action and y'all can't see that I'm nutty enough to be on this motherfucker, then we done. And so they went from having to prove that they were a quality choice for this show, that they fit and could hang, to being offered contracts before they even meet the cast. Kenya said it does not work. We've seen it season after season and they need to go back to the old model, and I agree. Kenya said another issue is she actually was the show. She didn't watch the show. She said, for example, she didn't understand the dynamic of Cynthia and Nene's friendship because she had no point of reference. She never actually watched the show. She said the difference in the women that they are casting now is these heifers are fans. That's the problem. So Kenya goes on to explain how both she and Porsha ended up on the show, that the peach holders at the time went on strike because of Kim's preferential treatment. Because they went on strike, there was no production going on, and so production had to do what they had to do, which is produce with the girls who didn't have a peach yet, so they couldn't go on strike yet. Kenya explained that this whole strike is what set up the foundation of Kenya and Porsha as we know them. That Kenya was invited to go to Porsha's event and to hang out with Porsha. They went to a lunch. Kenya says she was sizing Porsha up, but Porsha was a very sweet girl. She was not nice to Porsha. I'm sorry. She said, and then when she went to Porsha's charity event for her grandfather's charity, and Porsha's husband at the time was gifting her a Chanel bag in the middle of this charity event in front of all these people, she just thought it was really out of place. And so she spoke to that. Now, I agree that the gesture was out of place, but Kenya also didn't mind letting it be known exactly how she felt, when and where she felt it. Her issue with Porsha started when Porsha got her title wrong. She said now people do it all the time. They mix up Miss America and Miss USA because they think they're one and the same and they're interchangeable. But once I educate you and I ask you to call me by my correct title and you're dismissive, then we kind of got a problem. She said, now in that scene after Porsha got her title wrong, refused to accept the correction, laughed in her face in front of all her guests, Kenya decided to walk outside and get some air. She thinks that's when production pulled Porsha aside and said, you need to get some smoke to go with her air. You need to go tell her off. We need some scenes. Kenya said, now that's where our relationship went left. Because once you start insulting me, you done triggered some old shit and I'm going to tear your ass out the frame. Kenya said she felt like Porsha didn't get any accountability for how she treated Kenya. She kind of escaped under this bimbo act, whereas Kenya is being held accountable for how she reacted to Porsha. Now, I agree with that to some degree, but I also feel like, from what I remember from watching the show back then, Kenya kind of came on with some kind of an energy, not necessarily a vendetta, but a vengeance about her. Like, you could tell she don't give a damn about nobody. She will chop your ass up. And it seemed like any of the women who had husbands were not safe around her. She was going to find a reason to not like you. That's how it came off. Kenya said that's something she had a problem with, is that people perceived her as being jealous. She said she ain't jealous of none of these women. She's a beautiful woman herself. She has been around some of the most beautiful women in the world. Some of them are her friends. And so one damn thing she ain't is jealous. Now, my thing is, I don't think anybody ever thought Kenya was jealous of Porsha from an aesthetic perspective, from a beauty perspective. I don't think anybody ever thought that. At least I didn't. It was more maybe you envy her lifestyle. It was more, she has this husband, and it felt like Kenya wanted that. And that was part of where all the men she was dating was coming from, is she wanted to be married. She wanted to have a husband. She wanted this lifestyle. And it felt like she had an envy or some sort of a dislike toward women who had that lifestyle. So Carlos jumped to once Kenya was a housewife, or once she saw herself being aired on the show, and she's getting to see for the first time what the ladies thought about her and had to say about her in confessionals. She said, and the most disturbing thing to her was that there was this rumor that she was an alcoholic. Now, I barely remember that. She said, but it triggered her because it was the very thing that her mother tried to accuse her of all those years ago. She said she's never been drunk a day in her life. Now, she's been tipsy, you know, she have her a little drink and have her a good time. She said, so that bothered her, that they were creating, or that people had that perception of her. Well, honestly, I don't even remember that. So, I mean, I never thought Kenya was a drunk. Now, I think she got some other stuff going on, but I never thought she was a drunk. Kenya said it was Phaedra who was throwing around that she was an alcoholic. And Phaedra got that from Kenya confiding in her about her issues and her relationship with her mother, that her mother had accused her of alcoholism, that she believed that her mother had a mental health issue, and when she and Phaedra fell out, Phaedra turned around and threw all of that in her face. That's why she has the opinion that she has of Phaedra. Now, I'm going to tell you, that is very low. The part that I think Kenya is kind of leaving out is she was throwing herself at Phaedra's husband. Now, did Phaedra absolutely go low? Hell yeah. But I don't think Kenya is acknowledging that you was playing in that lady's face with that lady's husband. Now, I'm not saying she had a relationship or an affair or anything with Apollo before you get in my comments, but she ain't missed that man. I never said she did, but she was absolutely very flirtatious in a way that I thought was disrespectful. I remember watching that show thinking I'd have whooped Kenya and Apollo's asses, especially when they jumped in that pool. Ooh, bitch, when they jumped in that pool. So, I mean, she was dirty. That was some low shit. But let's not act like you wasn't playing with that lady husband in that lady face. Kenya said now when season 5 aired, the same thing we saw, she saw, and it sent her to a damn therapist. Kenya said she felt like what they were showing of her was a stretch in terms of who she was and her character, especially when we saw the scene where we saw her doing the coochie crack, and harassing the little girl. Kenya said because she was portrayed as this woman who would pick at another young black woman who was trying to come up, that crushed her soul, that broke her heart, because she said that is the farthest from who she is. Kenya said, as a matter of fact, she has a soft spot for young black women in need. She said she mentors a lot of people. She does her best to actually help as many young black women as she can. So she was really, really upset by that portrayal of her. Now, I don't know if it was editing. I don't know how much they could have edited her screaming coochie crack. While I get where she's coming from, I really, really do. And I really get and believe that it's not the intention of her heart to really hurt this young woman. I also think that Kenya came presenting this villainous character. Now, if Kenya is playing a character, I think the issue becomes the difference in who she is portraying to be her real self and who her real self really is. Kenya says she takes on a lot of cases of young women who remind her of herself, a little black girl from the ghetto who just wants something better out of life, who's just trying to survive her circumstances. So when she saw that she was portrayed that way, she said she didn't answer her phone for a week. A producer had to go to her house and sit with her for hours to pull her back from the ledge because she was on the edge of a mental breakdown. Kenya said she just wanted the story told the way that it happened. So I don't know if there really was some different version of events and they've edited it up and made her look like more of a villain than she actually is. Kenya said, she doesn't mind the fun stuff or even the jokes at her expense, but when it gets to portraying her to be this evil kind of a person who would pull another woman down, that's when it's a problem for her. Now, my thing is, if that's what you're doing and if that's who you are portraying yourself to be, what other image is there to project? If you come on the show and you're flirting with other women's husbands and things of that nature, how else are you to be perceived? Now, I get that they might have added fuel to the fire. They might have put 10 on pump 5. I get that. But were you not bringing fire for them to put fuel on? They discussed that apparently Kenya was so upset by how she was portrayed on the show that she was not going to come back. But Carlos was coming back to the show. He said he was so excited about working with the Kenya Moore, and they told him there is no more. She done decided she done with us. So he had to get on a plane and go all the way to LA and beg her to come back. Carlos said he gave her that famous speech. Well, I'm here now. And I'm going to hold your hand, but I can't do this without you. Well, doesn't that sound Love and Marriage Huntsville familiar? Well, Carlos and his speech worked because Kenya decided to come back. He says he felt like she and Porsha are what saved the show, what gave the show new life. And he asked her, does she agree? She said, hell yeah, I agree. And the executive producer agrees too. They told me that to my damn face. So Carlos asked Kenya the same thing that he asked Nene, which is, who would you say was your number one opponent? Who was the best person that you went up against where they absolutely dragged you for filth, but you could say it was interesting and entertaining? She said, well, that ain't no real damn question. Nene? So Carlos asked Kenya, well, do you miss Nene being on the show? She said, yep, sure the hell do. I miss cursing that bitch, y'all. She could take it as good as she give it. I miss her. Carlos said, well, do you agree with her when she says she built the house? Kenya said, yeah, she built the house, but it got foreclosed on. Oh, girl, damn. So they brought up season 6's reunion and how all the housewives were against Kenya, including their husbands. Kenya said, yeah, and I held my own against all those people, so please give me my flowers. Now, Kenya, here's the thing. You came on the show as a villain. That's part of the reason everybody was against you. Now, people don't typically give you flowers for being a villain unless you're trying to tell us you acting. Now, if you're telling us that you're acting and this is just a role that you're playing and you want your flowers for your excellent execution, that's one thing. But people ain't running around giving out roses for being an asshole. Carlos said he doesn't feel like Kenya gets the flowers that she deserves, that she's the most unappreciated housewife, and that when he's watching the reunions and the reunion seating, that it makes him sick to his stomach that she does not get the seat next to Andy. Kenya said she's actually discussed the issue with production. She said she feels like they would never move Nene's seat. And contrary to popular belief, the seating is not about who had the best storyline that season. Kenya said, as a matter of fact, Nene didn't have a storyline for the last 3 seasons that she was on the show, and her seat never got moved. She always got first chair. Now, Carlos goes on to say that he can confirm that the seating chart for the reunions is not about storyline. It's about who's the star of the season, who's the star of the show. Now, if it's about who's the star of the season, wouldn't that be about storyline? Kenya feels like even when you're not giving the most story, that doesn't change that you're the star of the show. She said, so for example, Nene would come and show off her shoes and be mad at everybody. She didn't have a storyline, but that didn't make her not the star of the show. Carlos asked Kenya, do you feel like your seat being moved around and not being secure is a message to you? She said, well, I don't know. If that's the case, then it's a message every season. But I will say that I don't feel like my time on this show has been as valued as it should be. I said, well, what in the exit interview is this? Y'all better be letting Bravo know how y'all feel. Kenya went on to say she want to know where her spinoffs are at. Because after everything she gave this show, she asked them for a spinoff to highlight her pregnancy and delivery of her baby. And they didn't give her that, but they gave Kim Zolciak and her wagon full of kids a whole damn show. Kenya said to Carlos that when she presented the idea of the spinoff for her pregnancy, she was denied that. She said to Carlos, and you know why. She said, I don't feel like it's fair because I feel like the show should always come first. Now, I think the why is because she got married to Mark off camera. Production nor the public were privy to any of her marriage, her conception, none of that. So you cut us out of all of that, and then now you want a spinoff special for the baby you having that's coming from all that stuff that you cut out. And by her same logic, if you feel like you should have gotten the spinoff because the show comes first no matter what, then that applies to your marriage and your wedding and your conception process. If you moved like the show doesn't come first, then why is it the show comes first when it comes to them? And that led Carlos right into his next question. He said, were you punished for marrying Mark Daly off camera? She said, absolutely. I don't know why you asking me that dumb shit. Everybody know that. Kenya said, now in all fairness, she's a very smart girl, so she does get both sides of the business. She said she understands them saying that, listen, you came onto this show and your whole storyline, your whole character was about you wanted to get married, you wanted a family, and now after we've invested all this in you, we've created this platform for you. When you do go to get the husband and the baby, you tell us we can't be no parts of that. Kenya said, but from my side of the table, I'm telling y'all, yeah, I do want those things, but I've proven to myself, to y'all, and the public that I can't get those things through this show. She said, every time I brought a man on this show, it seemed to be the kiss of death. She said, I could keep a man all before. I had 3-4 year relationships, proposals, and all kinds of shit. But every time I bring a man on this show, it crashes and burns. So she felt like she needed to separate the process. Kenya said, and the proof is in the pudding. She said, you see marriages failing across all the franchises of this show. And she even brought up a specific example of she was getting ready to bring a guy on the show. She said, before the man could get out my trailer, they got all kind of mug shots and all kind of shit on the man. So how am I supposed to get a husband if I can't even have peace enough to date because y'all gonna drag all the people's skeletons up out the closet soon as I meet them? So yes, it was a decision that cost her a lot, but she did what she felt was best for her. Kenya said she felt like she met somebody that she felt like she loved and wanted a life with, and she decided to get married. She said she felt like things were good until she brought her marriage to the show, and divorce papers ensued shortly thereafter. Now, my thing is, ma'am, I don't think that's because you brought it to the show. I think it's because you married a up individual. And I think what happened is you bringing it to the show brought it to the light in a way that you couldn't hide or deny. So you couldn't have this marriage in the shadows where this man is treating you like shit and then come to us like, oh, it's all good. No, we can see this. She said, and what she think further pissed production off is not only did she withhold all of these major life events from them, this man refuses to even film for the show. She said, but now he trying to change all that because now he got his own little TV show and now he want to be on TV. He want Brooklyn to be on TV after he done fought her tooth and damn nail, but he don't want his child on TV. You so full of shit. Let me tell you what Mark Daly is a perfect example of. Mark Daly is a perfect example of marrying somebody who is envious of you and wants your life. He wants her life. He wants to be on TV. He wants to be a star. And the only way he knew how to get it was marrying her and then trying to tear her down to get her star. People do not understand that spousal envy is real. You can truly be married to, laying with, building a life with a person who is jealous of you. And what's really interesting to me is when you listen to her explain the dynamics of the relationship with her mother, and you listen to her explain the dynamics of the relationship with Mark, it's the same kind of relationship. It's somebody that's supposed to love you, support you, be there for you, that you think you have partnership and family with, and they are literally out to destroy you. You mean to tell me you met this woman knowing she was a reality TV star and you would do everything in your power to get her off this show? You refuse to participate in this show. All that bullshit for you to turn around and say, you trying to be on TV, bitch? I low-key hope Mark ends up on TV so he can get dragged to the lowest chambers of hell where he belongs. So Carlos said, when I saw the pictures come out from y'all's wedding and I saw that y'all were fist bumping, the first thing I thought is something ain't right. So Carlos posed the question to Kenya if where she was in her life at that time had anything to do with her rushing to get married to Mark, being that she was on this show with all these women who had husbands and things of the sort, and they were going on couples trips, and she was the only single woman, and sometimes she gets into it with these women and their husbands jump in to defend them, but she doesn't have anybody to defend her. he asked, do you think that had any influence on your desire to have a husband, that maybe I want somebody to be able to stand up for me? Kenya said it didn't have anything to do with this show. She said she had actually met Mark a while before they actually got together. She went to a restaurant in New York. He was sitting at a table working on some paperwork because it was his restaurant. She met him, but she was fresh out of a relationship with somebody she's calling Crazy Eyes. I don't know if that's that one that tore up her damn garage and all that, but she was fresh out of this relationship, and so she wanted to clear her mind, her spirit, her being of that person before she tried to pursue anything else. Well, she gave herself a few months. She worked on herself. She felt like she was in a better position, and so she reached out to Chef RHOA and asked him, is your homeboy still single? He said, well, let me find out. Apparently, he claimed to be, and that's how him and Kenya came to be. Kenya said she felt like they genuinely connected, that they really had a connection between the two of them, so it had nothing to do with the show. So Carlos got straight to it. He said, is he trying to take your money? Kenya said he wants me to pay his bills. Some payment don't nobody understand, but quite honestly, that ain't what's holding up the divorce, because I give that motherfucker some money. If that's all he wanted, I would pay that bitch because I'll make the money back. But what he's trying to do is reverse whatever rights or decisions have been made in terms of Brooklyn appearing on TV, because now he wants Brooklyn to appear on TV with him. Carlos said, and speaking of Brooklyn being on TV, didn't Mark raise hell and say he was real upset to see Marlo kicking the door of the hotel y'all were in because Brooklyn was in that room? Kenya said he was allegedly upset because we talking about a man that ain't seen his child in 2 years and 2 days. So Mark, we gonna need you and your opinions to skip on down to deadbeat hell, okay? So Carlos asked Kenya, do you feel like the show ruined your marriage? Kenya said, no, Mark ruined our marriage. She said, I'm a good woman and I was a good wife. I was a good wife to him, and I'll be a good wife to whoever my next husband is going to be. Now, somehow they transitioned from that to discussing Kenya's track record with men on the show and being accused of paying guys to come on the show, and that Walter from all those seasons ago was actually somebody she was dating. But for some reason, he decided to partner up with Phaedra and sell this story that Kenya asked him to come on the show. Kenya said, now mind you, when he was going around doing those interviews saying that I asked him to be on the show, he never said that I paid him to be on the show. I don't know why people choose to believe that rumor, but yes, I asked him to be on the show because people have to sign releases and know when and where to show up to be on the show. She said, but fine as I am, I ain't never had to pay a damn soul to be no damn where with me. Kenya said everyone on the cast has some rumor that's been put out about them that for some reason or another sticks. And for her, the one that stuck was that she has to pay boyfriends or pay men to come on this show. Now, granted, Kenya is an absolutely beautiful woman. I don't think she has a problem turning heads when she walks down the street. Now, what I do think made people believe this about her is her personality. That she is very pretty, but she has a very nasty disposition sometimes. And so, yeah, you're pretty to look at, but not so fun to be with. And that might be what fed this notion for people that, yeah, you be buying them boyfriends. Now, do I think in reality that she was really paying anybody to come on this show? No. Do I think she has a bad picker and she was picking really bad men that we like, Kenya, where did you find him? Yes. And I think that might be also what fueled people thinking, girl, is you paying these niggas? Because where is you getting them? Kenya said, you know, they say everything I do is fake. I had a fake relationship, a fake marriage. Am I going through a fake divorce? Carlos said, yeah, fake affair with Apollo. She said, yes, fake affair with Apollo. And Carlos wrapped part one up by saying, and speaking of, let's talk about the allegations that you tried to suck Apollo's. So yeah, I guess that's what we'll be getting into when they pick up next week. But that's it, that's all, and I ain't got no more. Thank you so much for coming down here listening to me and let me get this off my chest. Please be sure to like, share, comment, and subscribe if you have not already. And in the meantime, until next time, just like every time, I love you and I mean it. Bye.